So will you please welcome the astonishing Curtis Sneden.
I lost track of time. Doug, would you help me choose? These or these? I was thinking the exact same thing. Now, Mr. Wright, I need to move 2 of these over to this arm. Should I move these 2 or these 2? Or maybe the ones in the middle? Or the ones on the end? Which 2?
The ones in the middle.
The ones in the middle? I was thinking the exact same thing. Now, Mike, you tell me, left or right?
Left.
I was thinking the exact same thing. Leanna, take those 2 ties. Feel the texture with your fingertips. Drink in the color with your eyes. Smell them if you think that would help. And then throw one of them back up to me. Very good. Would you stand, please, and hold that solid gold tie above your head. Please approach the stage. Isn't she lovely? You've chosen the solid gold tie, and Leanna, would you believe, I was thinking the exact same thing. That's the perfect response. That's what we're looking for. Thank you. So my name is Curtis, and I am a mystery performer. I used to call myself a magician, but mystery performers get paid more. So now I'm a mystery performer. And you might be wondering what a guy who performs mysteries has to say about improving your business or sales and marketing. Well, actually, 25 years of performing magic has taught me some very strong and powerful lessons. I sense that some of you are clapping inside your minds. Well, that's okay. You're one of those. Actually, that's a lot like how it was in the early days. You know, a little polite applause, and then everybody back to the bar. You know? And that was just the kids' shows. Every now and then, though, the audience and I would really connect, even if it was just 1 or 2 people. Those moments were so real and energizing that I had to learn how to create them instead of just hoping for them. So I studied as many magical texts that I could lay my hands on. I chatted with my coaches out in Las Vegas. I reviewed videos of my shows, looked for patterns, and I finally came to the conclusion that even though magic is premised on deception, the best magic, the kind that connects us, actually has a little thread of truth running just beneath the surface. The great American playwright Tennessee Williams put this very gracefully when he wrote, "The magician provides us truth in the pleasant disguise of illusion." So, ironically, what I've learned is that the most important thing for a magician to be is honest. Now, I use illusion to help me get my points across, but we're not here to talk about tricks tonight. We're going to explore some of those hidden truths. And where we're going, the magic is real. One of the very first effects I ever learned was a classic of magic. It's called the cut and restored rope. I probably haven't left you in much suspense there, have I? The title kind of tells you everything you need to know. Cut and restored. I was actually proud of that effect. I thought it was a pretty good illusion until, well, once after a show, this little kid came up to me and he said, "If you wanted the rope long, why did you cut it?" Well, I told him he'd better hurry along. His mom was driving off without him. But actually, that question stopped me in my tracks. I mean, really, what are we doing here? Cutting ropes just to put them back together again? How pointless is that? And then, I heard the story of a sociologist in the 1930s who was doing some research down in Mexico. And his colleagues there took him to visit a man who they called a curandero. Anyone in here ever heard the term curandero before? Have you?
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
Curandero is somebody that heals you with medicine.
Exactly, exactly. I think that if you translated it into English, some people who maybe are a little less sensitive to the nuance might say witch doctor. I don't think that's close. What I understand is, like you just said, a curandero heals people, but it doesn't use medicine in the sense that maybe we think of it. So this researcher went to visit a curandero, and if you read his report, it's like a movie screenplay. It's just perfect. This guy had this little dingy little shack on the edge of the village they were in. There was no light, just this little candle over in the corner. And when this guy walked out, he was the perfect embodiment of a curandero. He was about this tall. He was, barrel-chested. He had white hair shooting up off his head. He even wore a patch over one eye, straight out of central casting. Well, before they had a chance to talk, this curandero's first patient of the day came in. It was a little girl. And as far as that researcher could tell, she was holding a dog in her arms, and it looked to him as though that dog was waiting at the Rainbow Bridge, if you catch my meaning. It was just limp and lifeless in her arms. And she said, well, obviously she was speaking Spanish. She had to have this translated later, but what she said was, please, you've got to help me. My dog has stopped breathing. So the curandero knew he had to move very quickly. He stooped down and he gathered up that poor animal's leash, and then he pulled out a big knife and he cut the leash as a way of symbolizing the dog's illness. And then he tied it into a knot. Let's see. Did I pull on that? Is that tight enough? Is that tight? Okay, good, thank you. And the whole time, this poor girl, she's just on the floor, she's just rocking and moaning. So he pulled out what, to this researcher, looked kind of like a dried chicken bone. And then he asked the little girl to share a little bit of her life by breathing on the leash. And then he very slowly and gently pulled on the leash. And as she did, her eyes filled with tears of relief, because she could feel that her dog was breathing again. There's a little more going on there than just cutting and restoring ropes, isn't there? I had the privilege of performing that effect just a few months ago. And in the audience there was this elderly woman, and her two kids were with her. I overheard them speaking Spanish to one another. And after the show, they came up to me. And the son kind of nudged his mom, and he said, tell him. And so she kind of leaned in, she whispered, and she goes, my grandmother, she was a curandero. I mean, I dropped everything. And we sat and we talked about our family for 20 or 30 minutes. It was fascinating. And it was intimate, She seemed to be telling me things she probably hadn't told anybody else since she was a little kid. Ultimately, I said, well, I hope my rendering of the curandero here did honor to your grandmother's memory. She said, she just beamed at me. She said, oh, yes. She said, mi abuela, she was a healer, just as you said. Wouldn't you love to be able to connect with your clients at that level? Well, magic teaches us that if we stand any chance of really connecting with our clients or our teammates or an audience, we've got to understand that it's not about the tricks or the product. It's about how you made them feel. If you can discipline yourself to step outside of your mindset with all your worries and concerns and priorities and step into their mindset, listening, Well, you're not selling aspirin anymore. You're selling the headache going away. And you're thinking like a magician who never stops asking, what are we really doing here? That's lesson one. It's not easy because naturally enough, most of us are most comfortable staying inside our own heads, aren't we? I mean, we're normal. We're right most of the time. So let the other guy fend for himself. Furthermore, none of us likes to be approached by a performer or a salesman in such a way that we have to feel anything, right? Usually when I start, my audiences come in with this sort of thick robe of, distance and skepticism. A lot of folded arms when I start. I don't blame them. I'm the same way. But here's the thing that still astonishes me. If I make the first move by, letting my guard down or maybe showing them something they weren't expecting, then those audiences usually are eager to take their robes off. Like, don't spoil the moment. I was speaking figuratively. This is the second great lesson that magic teaches us. If I want to create a memory, an experience that either of us thinks is worth remembering, then I'm going to have to take the risk. I'll have to summon my courage and risk coming out to meet you. How are you? You having fun so far? Yeah. Good. That's about it. Here's a pen. What is your name? Carol. Hi, Carol. Not Curtis. Magician up there. I'd like you to think of someone from your life who you haven't thought of in a long time. It could be a childhood friend. It could be a relative you haven't heard from in years. But somebody whose memory brings you a smile. Have you got somebody in mind? Would you please write their name on that piece of paper? Now, the only reason I'm asking Carol to write that name down is because I want it to become fixed firmly in her mind. And I also don't want her to change her mind later to try to make me look silly. Now, let's see, Chris. When you were growing up, where are you from?
Wellington.
Wellington. Did you have pets around the house?
Yes.
Did you have a favorite pet?
Yeah.
Would you think of that animal now? And write its name on this piece of paper.
Okay.
Carol, have you written that name down? Would you fold that piece of paper back up and just look at it, confirm for us, we can't see your handwriting through the paper, can we? That's important. Would you please, I don't want to touch that. Please, do you have that back in the envelope? Good. Do you mind standing up? Seal that, please. And here's your envelope too. I need a third person who is going to, you fold that up and shove it back in there. I'll give you a pen in a second. I need a third person with a slightly different assignment. Somebody, Kathy, I have a sense, just from talking to you and reading your emails, you have an artistic bent, don't you? Yeah. I need somebody with an artistic bent because your job is to think of an object, any object at all. It could be something we might have found in your bedroom when you were a little girl. It could be something we find in your office now. But make it something such that, if you drew it out, you'd be able to draw it and we would recognize it. Have you got something in mind? Okay, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hand you a piece of paper. You will draw it on the piece of paper, and then you will just stuff it back into your envelope. Do you understand your assignment? Okay. Richard, I need you to function as our proctor tonight because you have an honest face. I can't speak to the validity of that face, but it seems honest. Your job is to gather up those envelopes once everybody's done. I think they are, that Carol's done. Please gather those up, make sure they're sealed, and then you will wait for me right over there. Okay? It's Carol and Chris, and then Kathy. Hey, Carol, do you mind joining me up here? Give Carol a round of applause. Thank you for returning the pen.
It's magic.
You are thinking of a person you haven't thought of in a long time. I want you to imagine that person's name is projected onto a screen over the audience's heads. Can you see that name in letters that are 5 feet tall. You focus on that name. I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to talk to you. You ignore me. You're focused on that name. But I think you'll be astonished to find that even though you're not communicating with me verbally, you're actually giving off hundreds of very subtle little clues as to what might be going on inside your mind. And to those of us who have learned how to discern those clues, well, the results can seem almost telepathic. Do you understand? Now, it would be helpful. Are we talking about a man or a woman up here? Okay, you're supposed to ignore me. Don't respond. You look at the name, you're focused out there. That was a trick. B, BC, BCDG. Actually, a lot of letters that end in that E sound, aren't there? Ever think about that? BCD. Okay. Okay, I think I picked up on something there. Let's try the vowels. A, E, I, O, U, A, E, I. Okay, okay. I think I'm seeing something there. Let's try, there's a little clump of letters in the middle of the alphabet. They are, we're saying like they're one word. We say elemental P, elemental P, elemental PQ, elemental PQ, QRS, STUV, T. Okay. I think I know what I'm seeing there. Okay. Carol, would you hold this up against your heart? Don't look at it just yet. And if my proctor would hand me Carol's envelope, this is the first one. It's got the little 1 on it. I guess 1. There you go. Thank you. Okay, so I asked you to think of a person from your childhood, and you chose to think of Diane. Okay. Who was Diane? A friend or relative? Good friend. Why don't you take a look at what you were telling me and show them. Give Carol a round of applause. Now, where's my pet owner, Chris? Come on up here. You know the rules? You are thinking of your favorite pet from childhood. Imagine that animal. Its name is projected on the screen in big letters. Are we talking about a dog or a cat? Good, you passed the test. Okay then. All right, Chris, you're focused. B, BC, BCD, BC, BCDG. Okay. Well, this doesn't always work. Sometimes I am not able to discern those clues. But my experience,
You're not going to get this.
My experience tells me it's worth taking the risk. Okay, elemental P, elemental PQ, QR, QRS, T, TUV. Okay. Okay. You are holding it in pretty tight, Chris, I'd have to say. A, E, I, O, U, A, E. Okay, I'm not sure what I'm seeing here. You know, Chris, what is a man? What is a man at the chief good and measure of his time? Measure of his time. Chief good and measure of... Okay, there we go. That helped. Is to eat and sleep, a beast no more. The Shakespeare helped. Okay. That is not a name that I know. But here, hold this up against your heart, please. Don't look at it just yet. Okay, so Chris, we asked you to think of your favorite childhood pet. And you thought of... Oh, Tinkerbell. That's the part I was stumbling on. Was Tinkerbell a dog or a cat?
Dog.
A dog named Tinkerbell. Did it have self-esteem issues? But it's okay. What kind of dog was it, Chris?
It was a mutt.
It was a mutt.
Yeah.
Okay, as I noted, sometimes this comes together, sometimes it doesn't. But take a look at what I felt like you were telling me. And so that we were pretty close. Tinkerbell. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Close. Now, Richard, you've done great. I'm going to we don't need this. You may take your seat. Would my artist come forward, please? Kathy, you are thinking of an object. Could have been any object in the world. Would you form a vivid mental picture of that object? We're having fun here. Are you having fun? Okay, that's kind of serious. Okay. Visualize that object. It's so vivid in your mind you can almost reach out and touch it. And can you see it out there? It's right there. Good. I'm going to hand you a pad this time and a marker. And this time I want you to sketch this object, but draw it big so that they'll be able to tell what you've drawn. Hold it back so I can't see it. And then wait just 1 second. I need to come over here. My job is to try to share this vision with you. In the ancient British Isles, they refer to this special gift as Amsheala. It's now known as second sight. Focus on that image and go ahead and sketch it for us. Okay. 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 Can you imagine a world in which, okay, I think I get it. I'm not sure I'm seeing all the detail. I think I know what we're looking at. In which we really could share our thoughts this way. I mean, think of all the misunderstandings that could have been avoided, all the suffering that didn't have to happen. See, you're done. Why don't you close up that marker if you haven't already? Good. Thank you. Now hold that against your heart and join me here. You were thinking of an object. It could have been anything in the world. Let's sketch this out a little bit. If you'd been thinking of a baseball and I drew a circle, I mean, that would be a coincidence, right? But that wouldn't prove very much. You weren't thinking of a baseball, were you? Why don't you show us what you were thinking? Okay. That's a plant. That's a sunflower. That's a sunflower. It's a Kansas sunflower. Well, we took a risk, and there can really be no doubt when we've experienced second sight. Woo! Give Kathy a big round of applause and all of our volunteers. Really, it was worth the risk. The last insight I'd like to share with you may be the most honest thing a magician's ever going to tell you. This lesson has transformed my performances, many of my relationships, and is helping through some tough times. You see, we spend years trying to learn new techniques, practicing our sleight of hand, rehearsing our shows, all with the aim of achieving perfection. We may come close, but we never really get there. I mean, props break, microphones go dead, somebody will say something that throws you for a loop. One time my dove broke out of her little secret place right in the middle of a show. And she flew, the whole audience looked up as she fluttered over their heads and out the door. It was beautiful. I fired her. Actually, just a really dull pet. Sometimes we take her out at Christmas, we set her in the tree to startle our house guests. But she doesn't perform anymore. She's too unstable. 20 years ago, I was hired to perform before a room of about 800 people at a corporate sales meeting. And I had several senior executives up on the stage with me. I was just about to pull the trigger on a big illusion. You remember that thread of truth we talked about a little bit ago? This was a literal thread, and it broke. And when it did, that illusion was irretrievably lost. There was no way I could act like it hadn't happened, no way I could pretend that's what I meant to do, which, by the way, is how we cover up for the vast majority of our mistakes. In this case, no. All 800 of those people could clearly see what had happened, and they knew it was bad. My options did include shrieking and running off the stage, but I chose to acknowledge it and then just hurry on to something else. By the time it was over, I sort of snuck behind the curtain there and I just collapsed. I was sure no one would ever ask me to perform magic again. But here's the amazing thing. People made a point of coming up to me after that show and complimenting me on how I'd handled the situation. And they weren't being sympathetic. They were genuinely impressed. One guy was kind of mad because he hadn't noticed it. And the fellow sitting next to him told him about it. He actually thought it was more magical that somehow I slipped this big disaster right under his nose. I was dumbfounded. I mean, here my perfectly rehearsed script had been ripped out of my hands by a little thread, and it didn't seem to make all that much difference. Even today, every now and then, somebody will come up and tell me they were there that day, and you know, they don't dwell on the fact that I made a mistake. What seems most important to them is that they had been part of something out of the ordinary. We strive for perfection, but in fact, it's the imperfections that make us memorable and real. Beautifully real. 23 years ago, our doctor came into the delivery room and handed me our third child. And he said, "This one's special." That was a magic moment, whether my wife and I knew it or not. I mean, magic is the art of transformation. And in that moment, everything changed. I'm not here to talk about children with disabilities or my daughter. If she wants to get rich and famous, let her do her own TED Talk. Here's my idea worth sharing. I didn't get to choose whether to become the father of a child with special needs. But there was one thing I could choose: my response. And yes, I dabbled in self-pity and bitterness and disappointment, general victimhood. I didn't stay there very long because those are very lonely places. And the wallpaper is exceptionally drab. I do want to make one thing very clear though. None of those emotions ever had anything to do with this amazing person who had just come into our lives. I was never bitter about her. How could I be? I was hurt and confused because I'd just been slapped in the face by the reality that I'm not nearly as in control of my life as I thought I was. I'd had my script ripped out of my hands. But then I was pierced straight through by an insight so crystalline it couldn't possibly have come from my mind, as bewildered as I was at that point. I hadn't lost control of anything. I never really had control in the first place. None of us does. This sense we have that we're in control of our lives, ultimately, that's just a very convincing illusion. And I hadn't been robbed of my life script. I've been set free from it. You know, I look back and I realize that a lot of the stage directions in that old script were kind of tough. You know? No dancing. People smell funny. You probably smell funny too. The same would be true of hugging. Don't do either of those. And that man over there, you don't know him. Try not to make eye contact. He might talk to you. Don't bother crying. Tears are just a waste of good salt. I don't read from that old script anymore. I mean, geez, I hug like freaking Barney now. I mean, yeah, it does that. Our lives are going to be imperfect. Threads are going to break. We are going to be thrown off script by the unexpected. That's not really the question. What matters is how we choose to respond. Do we whimper and run off the stage, curse our fate? Or do we embrace the imperfections that make us real? Maybe allow our hearts to break open a little bit so that we can live and love and forgive in ways that we might not have understood before. I'd like to close by telling you about a man who is arguably the greatest magician who ever walked the face of the earth. He was from Argentina, and his name was René Lavande. Now, Lavande is not all that well known here in the United States, but to those audiences around the world who witnessed his performances, this man was a legend. Here's the thing. René Lavande only had one hand. He lost the other one in a car wreck when he was a kid. And yet he could do more with one hand than most of us could do if we had three. Tonight I want to share some of Lavande's magic with you. You'll be glad that he refused to listen when people told him his dream of becoming a great magician was impossible. He would begin by dealing out the 4 aces and leaning them up against a wall. And then he would deal out 3 indifferent cards onto each ace. Now that might be a word that we don't use all that much in ordinary conversation. Indifferent. All it means to us here is that the identities of these cards doesn't make any difference to us. We don't really care which cards they are. The point is that each ace gets 3 of them. And you have to remember, the great Lavande is doing all this dealing with one hand. 3 indifferent cards for each ace. And then he would take one of the aces, say the ace of spades, and it's 3 indifferent cards, and he would set them off to the side somewhere, someplace where they are in plain view, but they're safely out of range. Now the magic begins. He'd start with that first ace. In our case, it's the ace of clubs. He would mix it in with the 3 indifferent cards, and then he would very slowly show you those 3 indifferent cards. And to your utter astonishment, that first ace, the ace of clubs, seemed to just vanish before your eyes. He'd move on to the second ace. It's the ace of diamonds. Again, he would show you those 3 indifferent cards. And again, to your utter astonishment, it seemed as though that second ace, the ace of diamonds, just evaporated into thin air. I mean, it's not there, Dad. He knows you're watching closely now. So he would go even more slowly than before. He would say, "No puedo hacer más despacio." I can't do this any more slowly. And then just to prove he was being fair, he would very slowly count out 1, 2, 3, 4 cards. And none of them was an ace. How do you respond to a life that is imperfect and largely beyond your control? Well, I made my choice a long time ago. I embraced the imperfection, and ever since, the dance has been amazing.